72 hours before the lights bent over State Farm Arena, Atlanta had already flipped the script on what a tour stop was allowed to be. Forget the countdown clocks, forget the marketing. By the time the sun crawled above I-85 on Friday morning, a small tremor was running through Centennial Olympic Park, and every foot on that pavement knew the source. Cardi B had not walked on the stage yet. Not a single spotlight had warmed up, and still the capital of the South was behaving like something sovereign had landed on its soil. This was not a concert waiting to happen. This was a city stepping into formation, and if you blinked, you missed the entire architecture of a cultural eruption forming in real time. Rewind the clock a little further, and the math gets even wilder. Fans were stationed outside that arena before most of Atlanta had finished breakfast. No fatigue, no grumbling, no complaining about the heat bouncing off the concrete. Instead, a strange kind of discipline. The discipline you only see when people believe they are standing on the edge of something historic. They were not waiting to get inside a venue. They were guarding a doorway into a moment that had been promised to them the second the Little Miss Drama Tour dropped its first billboard. And Atlanta, being Atlanta, did not show up to witness. Atlanta showed up to compete. You could feel that energy radiating off the sidewalk. This was not a polite fandom. This was a city in full armor mode. Pull back and look at that line. It stretched like a parade rerouted straight out of a dream sequence. Custom Little Miss Drama fits everywhere. Bedazzled cowboy hats catching noon sunlight like little mirrored satellites. Sheer paneling pulled directly from Cardi's tour wardrobe and rebuilt through the hands of local stylists who clearly treated this day like their own debut. Every single person on that sidewalk dressed like the camera was already rolling, because on this block, the camera was always rolling. Strangers converted into accomplices inside of 30 seconds. Group chats turned into choreography circles. Somebody pulled out a speaker and the whole row became a rehearsal. The pulse was already hitting 1,000 before a single usher had checked a single ticket. And here is where the magic really fractures the ordinary. Listen to the conversations. One cluster was stacking quotes like gospel, trading bars like sacred text. "A Barty never gets cold," screamed at full volume by a group whose outfits were frankly undeniable proof of the statement. Another fan, calmer, colder, leaned into her friend with the line, "I'm my own competition. I'm competing with myself." And the people around her absorbed it like a commandment etched in stone. Then, right in the middle of that crowd, one woman lifted a sign. 3 words, "Hood Mona Lisa," and something snapped in the air. The chant started low, almost shy, then swelled until 20 people were repeating it, then 50, then the whole front section. That was not a quote anymore. That was identity. That was lineage. That was an entire generation of women declaring their own canon right there on the sidewalk. And Cardi had not even cleared her dressing room. As the sun began to tilt west, something subtle shifted. The playful energy outside started condensing into anticipation. Real, weighted, almost physical anticipation. You could feel the city exhaling at a different tempo. Phones came out a little less, voices dropped a little lower, feet shuffled a little closer to the entrance. Then the doors gave way. The crowd spilled inside like water hitting an open floodgate. Seats filled, lights dimmed just enough to announce that a countdown had quietly begun. For one single beat, the arena went almost still. Not silent, never silent in Atlanta, but quiet enough to hear the tension take shape above 20,000 heads. And then detonation. The bass dropped like a freight train crashing through the ceiling, strobe columns slashed the dark, and rising above it all, suspended on a massive floating platform that looked engineered by Broadway and NASA in the same meeting, was Cardi B herself. Not walking, not running, levitating into her own mythology. Every single person in that building had just clocked the exact same realization at the exact same second. This was going to be one of those nights that future concert tours get measured against. This was not an entrance. This was a statement carved in lightning. She slid straight from her intro into Hello, and within that first 12 seconds, you already knew the night was refusing to follow any known template. Every syllable sharpened, every hip movement calibrated, every ad-lib placed with the precision of a surgeon who also happens to be the headliner. She did not ease in. She kicked the door off the hinges and kept running. She never slowed down. Not once. Across the night, she blitzed through 6 custom fits, each one more detailed than the last, each one feeding a different chapter of the story. But the red and black sheer piece that landed mid-set, that one detonated the front row. Phones shot into the air like flares. Screams stacked into screams. People were not trying to record a song. They were trying to bottle proof that they had witnessed a flex this clean with their own eyes. Security in that section was smiling, which almost never happens. Even the camera operators on the floor were moving differently. You could tell the whole building understood in that moment that it was standing inside a night that was going to live on the internet for months. And the wild part? That was still not the ceiling, because right when the room settled into the rhythm of ordinary greatness, the architecture of the show shifted again. Lights softened, the beat pulled back, the arena leaned forward without being asked. And out walked a new silhouette, a custom piece built specifically for Atlanta, a shimmering sculptural metallic dress that drank every laser in the building and threw it back as a living mosaic. From one angle, it was armor. From another, it was liquid mercury. From another, it was a chandelier dancing on 2 legs. She eased into Please Me, and the entire room softened with her. Voices dropped to a hush. Phones lifted, the dress moved like it had weather inside of it, reflecting camera flashes and patterns that made the whole lower bowl look like a constellation field. Then, without warning, the circuit flipped. The opening pulse of I Like It rolled in and the stage ignited into carnival. Tropical color patterns flooded the LED walls, the metallic dress caught a new kind of light and suddenly transformed, a Peacock-inspired silhouette unfolding under stagecraft that felt yanked out of a film set. Cardi's gears shifted instantly. Energy vaulted back to 1,000. Her footwork sharpened. Her presence blared louder than the sub bass. That outfit became viral gold in the space of half a verse. If you scrolled social media within an hour of that moment, you know exactly which frame I am describing, because that frame is already stitched into the timeline of pop history. And if you did not scroll, trust me, the algorithm will find you soon enough. There is no hiding from a visual that clean. Here is where the night delivered the segment every city on this tour had been trying to crack, the Pretty and Petty Mute Challenge. Boston had attempted it, Connecticut had swung at it, but Atlanta stepped up to the plate with something to prove, and the result was honestly ridiculous in the best way possible. The beat was rolling, the crowd was shrieking, uncontrollable, electric, stacked on top of itself. Then Cardi flicked her wrist and the music just stopped. She looked into the dark, waited, listened, and 20,000 voices, 20,000 throats, 20,000 bodies sealed themselves into absolute silence. Not almost silent, not mostly silent. Full vacuum. The kind of silence that is actually loud, because it takes a level of group discipline that most rooms cannot pull off. For those few seconds, Atlanta owned the entire planet. Then, the beat came crashing back in, and the room combusted, jumping, screaming, losing every thread of composure. At that moment, Atlanta was not participating in the tour. Atlanta was co-writing the tour. You could see it on Cardi's face, too. She clocked what just happened. She registered that she had asked for discipline, and the city had delivered it in surgical fashion. That little smirk she flashed right after the beat dropped back in, that was the smirk of a headliner realizing the crowd had just passed a test that no other city had passed this run. But even that was not the peak, because this is where the concert stopped being a concert and started being a coronation. Cardi had been gliding through her set like a conductor on rails, calculated, polished, ruthless in her timing. Then she paused, tilted her head, threw that knowing half smile at the front row, and dropped a line that felt suspiciously like a setup. Maybe I need somebody to come sing the blues for me. Maybe I need somebody to come sing the blues for you. The crowd did not wait for clarification. The air itself told them what was coming. The stage lights bent, the tempo shifted into something slower, heavier, wetter with feeling. And out walking onto that platform, silhouetted in amber, was Mariah the Scientist. The reaction was not a reaction. It was a detonation with emotion. Cameo. This was not a celebrity cameo. This was a chapter of Atlanta's current R&B renaissance stepping into the arena and confirming itself in front of 20,000 witnesses. Voices across the arena rose into the chorus, not just singing along, but carrying the song, each row gripping the melody like it belonged to them. You could see couples locking eyes. You could see groups of women holding each other's arms. The emotional temperature climbed past anything a standard tour stop is supposed to deliver. For a minute, you forgot you were at a rap concert. For a minute, you were inside a live recording of an era being born. And for Mariah herself, this was a homecoming stamp, a full public embrace from a peer on one of the biggest stages of the year, the kind of moment her catalog has been quietly building toward. And right when the crowd started breathing normally again, the sub-bass came creeping back through the floor, that unmistakable low-end signature, that specific growl that Atlanta raised in its basement. Out walked the snowman himself, Jeezy, young Jeezy, the patron saint of the ATL trap era, and if you thought the room was loud before, you had not been properly informed. The screams climbed into a register that felt more like thunder than vocal cord. This was not nostalgia. This was legacy colliding with present tense dominance. This was one generation acknowledging another, and the entire building rattling under the weight of that handoff. The veterans in that crowd were rapping every word. The younger fans, who might not have grown up on the Snowman era, were catching their first real taste of why he gets mentioned in every serious Atlanta conversation. Even then, even after a superstar entrance, a fashion pivot, an R&B reveal, and a trap legend, the night still had one more card hidden in the deck. Because when you are hosting a night in Atlanta, you do not just celebrate the culture, you bow to the architecture. You acknowledge the blueprint. And right on cue, another silhouette stepped out from stage left. T.I, the king of the South, the living framework, the man whose fingerprints are on half of the sound the city exports across the world. He did not need to rap a full song to make the moment land. His presence alone was a cosign stamped in stone, a full circle loop, a ceremonial handshake between dynasties. At that point, you were not attending a tour stop anymore. You were sitting inside a city lifting its own reflection into the sky. Somewhere backstage, a tour manager was probably crying into a headset. And somehow, with all of that already stacked up, the night still had another layer running parallel to the main event. Because while the stage was devouring attention, there was a second show rolling silently inside the venue. The VIP sections looked like a red carpet that had decided to relocate indoors. If you scanned the front bowl, you could pick out faces like playing cards, industry executives, influencers, athletes' families, media operators, all convened for one shared reason: to stand inside the same oxygen Cardi B was reshaping. Front row, locked in, vibing bar for bar, was Taylor Pullier-Williams, fully in sync with every beat, like she had been handed an advance rehearsal tape. Her energy never dipped once. Every chorus, every ad-lib, every drop, she was there for it. A few seats away, Stefon Diggs' mother, present, attentive, supportive, and given everything happening around that family in the current news cycle, her presence carried a second layer of meaning. This was not just fandom, this was public solidarity, a quiet signal, a reminder that the people around Cardi on any given night are not accidents, they're statements. Up in the suites, Atlanta royalty herself, Kandi Burruss, fully switched on, moving with her crew, laughing into her phone, catching every key change like she was curating her own private mix inside the real show. Kandi does not sit still in Atlanta, and last night was not about to be the exception. Watching her light up every time Cardi hit a certain ad-lib was honestly its own mini-documentary. But somewhere between the stage and the suites, the single most replayed clip of the evening came from, of all places, a seat in the crowd. Jason Kelce. Yes, that Jason Kelce, the one whose Cardi B fan arc has become one of the most wholesome running storylines of the last year. Caught on camera singing word for word, ad-lib for ad-lib, pause for pause, matching her energy like he had been handed the set list by her management. He wasn't performing, he was a civilian, but anyone watching that clip would swear on record that he knew this music better than most of the people currently quoting it on social media. Internet archivists already started cataloging his appearances at Cardi shows. It's basically a running series at this point. Now, as the tempo ramped back up, Cardi stacked hit after hit without mercy. Bodak Yellow, WAP, back to back to back. each one landing harder than the one before it, each drop punching a new bruise into the Richter scale. The arena had been screaming for so long, the noise had merged into its own weather pattern. And then, right in the center of that chaos, she did something nobody expected. She slowed it all the way down. Not a fake slowdown for theatrics, a real one, a breathing one. The stage lights dimmed to that warm amber you only see in closing scenes of films. The noise settled into a reverent hush. The entire room, every single row, suite, pit, and aisle, understood simultaneously that the next words out of her mouth were not going to be part of the set list. She looked out into the dark, took one breath, then let the Bronx roll out of her chest. She talked about the blocks she grew up on, the winters that felt longer than years, the version of herself who could not have imagined standing where she was standing. Her first real arena run, city after city, sold out after sold out, night after night. And you could hear it in her voice, that fragile hybrid of pride, gratitude, and a ghost of disbelief still clinging to every sentence. Then she dropped the line that landed inside every chest in that building. Don't let nobody take your happiness away. Simple words, zero gimmicks, zero choreography. But inside a room of 20,000 people who had just spent 2 hours losing their minds, that sentence rewired the atmosphere. Phones dropped, hands went still. You could see grown men blinking a little longer than usual. You could see groups of women leaning into each other without saying anything. That was not Cardi the superstar talking anymore. That was Cardi the person, the mother, the survivor, the girl from the Bronx who used to write her own scripts on Instagram before the world ever offered her a microphone. And Atlanta, a city that knows exactly how much grit it takes to build a throne, felt every syllable. That exchange right there was the real divider, because a show gives you spectacle, a moment gives you something you carry home in your ribcage. And every single person in that arena walked out of there carrying something extra under their jacket. And that, ultimately, is what Friday night in Atlanta actually was. It was not simply a tour stop. It was not simply a sold-out arena. It was culture meeting ambition, meeting legacy, meeting lineage inside a single breathing organism. 34 shows deep into this run, and the tour is somehow still ascending. The set list is sharpening, the visuals are compounding, the guest appearances keep escalating from surprise to myth. If night one looked like this, then night two, already locked in, is not a bar anymore. It is a ceiling pushed so high that only Cardi herself has the clearance to touch it again. And somewhere in the middle of all that mania, she reminded an entire city that the most important thing she has ever done with a microphone is tell the truth. Outside the arena, after the lights came up, the conversations did not stop. They multiplied. Strangers comparing clips, groups recreating the mute challenge on the sidewalk, Uber drivers playing the set list if they rolled out of downtown, gas stations on Peachtree turned into impromptu after-parties. Somebody was blasting Please Me out of a candy-painted Charger at a red light, and 3 separate cars started singing along without being asked. That is not a normal Friday. That is the residue of a cultural event spilling into an entire metro area. You could feel the night clinging to the city long after the last encore. That is how you measure a real one. Not by the tickets sold, not by the merchandise tables, but by how long the pulse of the night keeps beating inside the people who touched it. And Atlanta, trust me, will be beating with this one for weeks. Here's something else worth sitting with. There's a specific thing that happens when an artist's tour machinery starts firing in total alignment. The visuals, the set list, the guest appearances, the crowd interaction, the emotional beats, the fashion reveals. It's rare. Most tours hit maybe 3 of those pillars. This one is currently hitting all 6 night after night, and it shows no signs of slowing down. You can already see the industry recalibrating in real time. Other artists on tour right now are quietly studying this template. Choreographers are pulling stills from these shows. Stylists are reverse engineering the fits. That's what dominance actually looks like. Not just filling a room, but forcing the entire lane to adjust its speed because of what you just pulled off. And let's talk about that mute challenge for one more second, because it deserves a second look. The idea of freezing 20,000 people in total silence and trusting them to read the cue is absurd on paper. It should not work. It relies on every single person in that room being locked in, respectful, and emotionally in sync with the performer. Most crowds cannot deliver that. Most crowds will always have that one pocket of noise that ruins it. Atlanta did not. Atlanta delivered a full vacuum. That tells you everything about who was in that building and why they were there. It was not casual. It was not accidental. That was community under pressure performing flawlessly, which, if you think about it, is basically the unofficial definition of the Atlanta hip-hop ecosystem itself. So before this ends, a small, honest question. Were you actually inside that building? Did you feel the floor shift when Jeezy stepped out? Did your voice disappear into that silence during the mute challenge? Did Mariah the Scientist's verse hit you in a place you did not expect? Or was it the quiet Bronx speech that stayed with you longer than any of the pyrotechnics? Whichever moment claimed you, that is the moment the tour built specifically for you. Because on this run, Cardi is not performing to a crowd, she is performing to individuals, and then asking the individuals to remember each other on the way out. That intimacy scaled to arena level is honestly the rarest ingredient in modern live music right now. One thing is now undeniable. Atlanta did not attend the Little Miss Drama Tour. Atlanta hosted it. Atlanta co-authored it. Atlanta stamped its name onto the permanent record of this campaign. And when Night 2 opens its doors on April 18th, the only question left is whether the city will meet the ceiling or raise it again. If Friday was any indication, the ceiling is already negotiable. Rumors are already floating around about possible new surprise guests. Screenshots are circulating. People on the inside are hitting without confirming. And Cardi herself, if her track record on this tour means anything, is almost certainly cooking up something that will make Night 1 look like a warm-up. So, lock in. Keep the notifications on. Stay dialed into the clips. The story is still unfolding in real time, and every 24 hours on this tour is delivering a new chapter that somebody, somewhere is going to be studying 5 years from now in a documentary. The Little Miss Drama Tour is not just a concert run anymore. It is a moving cultural event with a traveling archive attached to it. And based on everything Atlanta just witnessed under those lights, this archive is only getting heavier, louder, and harder to ignore with every stop. And pay attention to one more detail while you are still processing Friday. Every time Cardi hits a city this tour, something about that city gets reflected back at it. Within a week, the fashion trends reroute, the playlists reshuffle, the slang mutates. Atlanta is about to go through its own version of that ripple. Do not be surprised if the bedazzled cowboy hat quietly becomes the uniform of the summer down here. Do not be surprised if Mariah the Scientist's streams double overnight. Do not be surprised if that quiet Bronx speech gets chopped up and remixed into a viral audio within 48 hours. Tours this big do not just leave memories, they leave blueprints. And Atlanta is already picking up the pencil, ready to sketch its own version of the aftermath into the rest of this year's culture calendar. Stay pretty, stay sharp, keep your eyes wide open, and whatever you do, do not miss what happens next, because something about this run keeps suggesting the wildest chapter has not even fully loaded yet.